All Brock Resney here, reporting on ability grouping and ability grouping in school. Um, I started out by kind of talking about how there is always going to be a disparity in student learning. The fact is that we are different people. We come from different backgrounds. We have different genetic makeup. We have different influences that affect our ability to learn and how we learn. And I honestly, that's a good thing. In my opinion, if everyone was the same and everyone did the same thing, um, it would not be any fun to be in this world, and education would be way different than it is today. We also wouldn't it wouldn't be as interesting. Um, I focus on a meta-analysis of over the last 100 years, like some of the other classmates of mine have, and a lot of it came back with there are mixed feelings about this. Some teachers tend to lean towards doing it, and some don't for different reasons. And I think that ultimately I tend to lean to I like ability grouping. I think that if we want to challenge students in different ways, then we have to be able to find a way to give them that challenge. One of the arguments that I made for doing ability grouping was that if we want to do it and we want to do it effectively, we have to train our teachers to be ready to do this, whether they have the high group or the middle group or the low group. They have to be able to make a challenge that meets their needs. One of the things in the article, one of the things the article talked about was how oftentimes the challenge for the low group is more just like remembering and just getting that information down, recall and remembering, where the high group is the applying. And I think that's where our teachers need to be trained to how do we get those low students to still apply the information, but in a different way. And I think that's the key there. The main thing, uh, or one of the quotes that I had kind of put in here was that each student is different and that each has unique learning needs that every teacher must make special efforts to meet. Otherwise, some students will become bored because they are inadequately challenged, and others will become discouraged by expectations that are beyond their abilities. And I think this is very true. Um, a lot of the things they talked about in the article for why to not ability group is that there's kind of this idea that if we ability group, there's going to be a bigger educational gap and a bigger learning curve, and there's going to be achievement gaps. Different educational opportunities will be given to those students who are higher, and also a lower self-concept and self-esteem for those lower achieving students. While I can see that, I think it also comes down to how do we effectively do that, and how do we effectively get them to see that they are learning just at a different pace. Some of the good things that I found about ability grouping was that allows teachers and students to also increase their satisfaction with student needs. Ultimately, if you ability group, you're probably going to have teachers that relate to those students and can give them assignments that they're interested in, and instead of making learning feel like a chore, it's going to feel more entertaining and engaging, and they're going to be probably doing some more hands-on things, especially when they're applying the knowledge, not just recalling and remembering. But this is work because it takes a lot of tough work because the educators have to understand who their students are, and then they have to match them with a teacher that they are going to get along with. And it's also tougher in small schools because those things are tougher to do because you don't have as many teachers and you have uh, less ability to do that. Overall, I think that ability grouping is a positive thing. I think that high achieving students continue to challenge themselves is good, and I think that challenging low students in their own ways will help them not be so frustrated. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it other than like people say it's not equitable. Well, then we need to find a way to make it equitable. We need to give them the same resources, the same opportunities, the same things that they need to learn, and then just apply it in a different way. Um, I don't like when my students sitting in the classroom and are frustrated. And I have some high flyers right now that we're getting towards the end of the year and they're bored because the stuff that we're talking about they get, and they understand and they're ready to move on. But I have to stop and give another example for those lower students, or I have to slow this down and I have to pull groups of students to learn this thing differently. And then my high flyers get done and then they're sitting there bored for the rest of the time, and I have to find them challenge things and those kind of things, which are good for them and they enjoy that. But it still is difficult because then my low students are like, well, why do I have to sit here and learn this when they're over there playing that game or they're over doing that activity? And that's tough for them to understand. And ultimately, when we talk about kind of how ability grouping was in the past, yeah, kids are kids are going to catch on. They're going to catch on where they're at. They know ultimately where they're at education wise. And so if we can challenge them at where they're at, I think that's the best for them. So I think if we return to my main argument of each student is different and each student learns differently and needs something different to succeed, then we need to find a way to do that. And my questions to the opponents of ability grouping are that, like, why hinder a student's ability to learn, um, while you're waiting for someone or you're frustrated for something. So instead of hindering their ability to learn because it's too high or too low, why don't we meet them where they're at, and let them catch up in their own ways and give them opportunities to learn in ways that are good for them. So um, I may be more on the side of ability grouping than some, and I think that it's one of those things that could get some pushback. But I look forward to your comments, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. So, thank you.